Okay, good morning everybody. Welcome to the second day of the joint workshop Urban Flood and Sensor Grid for Environment. This morning we have the last theme, and it's about applications and users and implementation. We have 4 presentations in that theme, and after that we will have a discussion about the future and possibilities for cooperation. And then there will be a lunch available, and after that, well, you can go your way. The first speaker in this theme is Professor Mike Clark. He is Professor of Geography and Director of the Geodata Institute of the University of Southampton, and he's going to talk about what's the point of users. As far as I understand, you can explain this in 2 ways. What's the point of users? What's the? I think it's meant like that also. Okay. Okay. There you are.
Thank you. Good morning, welcome. I love the program, don't you? Starting up slowly. Well, I am the slow start. No algorithms, no models, no challenges, just this very, very strange animal called a user. And we all have to deal with users. And whether we're working in the commercial sector or the research sector, whether we're doing research projects or putting in research bids, everybody says work with the users. And it's a fascinating challenge, because how you work with the users raises a whole series of really quite substantial questions. The problem is twofold, because there are, in the way that we position our relationship, there are 2 sides to the link. On one side there's us, and on the other side there's the user. And I'm going to carry this theme through a set of examples which have 2 particular strands. One, of course, is flooding and flood management, and I'll concentrate on that because that is the theme of your meeting in Amsterdam. The other is the management of ships. But both of these are fed by meteorological data and by sea state data. So they are 2 applications from a single set of data inputs. And that's very much the essence of the SG4E project that was introduced to you yesterday. Being able to take multiple feeds of data and use them in very different ways. Now, if we ask this question, whose problem is it? There are 2 possibilities. One is that it belongs to the developers, the scientists, the modelers. It's our business, and we will tell the users what they need to know. We will manage them in such a way that we end up with the project that we want. Or it could be the users. And Craig, who is my co-author on this paper, Craig introduced to you yesterday some of the users engaged in this SG4E project. The Environment Agency of the United Kingdom, a government executive agency, Associated British Ports, a commercial group that runs the biggest ports in Britain, and then a series of other user organisations. Where does the problem sit? And at one level it isn't a problem, and at another level it is, because there's a massive culture gap between these 2 groups. This is a direct transcript from an SG4E report, and I absolutely love it, and I haven't the faintest idea what it means. I've been working on this project for, 2.5 years, and I still have not the faintest concept what these underlying software drivers are about. Because Geodata Institute's task within this project is to sit between the software developers on the one hand and the users on the other. And the other side of the culture gap is a set of experts, of politicians, of managers, of local authorities who have simple needs, immediate needs. Where is the flood? When is the flood? can I evacuate this area? All of these questions, and it's bringing those two communities together that I want to talk about. Now, I will not dwell, because Craig has already dwelt on the context of the problem. You'll remember that we are dealing with a case study built around our hometown, Southampton, on the south coast of England, a major port on an estuary, which is quite significant. So the port is at the top of a long and complex sea route. So the biggest ships in the world, literally, the biggest cargo ships and the biggest cruise ships in the world have to navigate an incredibly complex waterway. They have to do it regardless of the state of the sea, and they have to do it even under flood conditions. And this is the area within which we're trying to produce information flows that are useful, that help that management process. We have a set of users from government through the public emergency services, people who collect data, professionals who disseminate data, and then huge numbers of end users. And we make the distinction between the users, who are professional data handling managers, and the end users whose task is something very much more operational, but in very large numbers. And we're trying to help them answer their questions. We're doing it with a flood scenario, and this is the one that is of particular interest to you, and it is a blend of marine flood and fluvial flood, because we're on an estuary, so it's driven by both of those components. But the data collection and the modelling are dominated by the marine element. And as I've suggested, we also have a shipping scenario. This is part of the operational radar. These images are collected every 5 seconds. Every dot on that map is a vessel. There are huge numbers of recreational vessels competing for space with the biggest ships in the world that can't stop, as many of you know. Once a ship starts on this journey, it is essentially unstoppable until it gets to the top. So we have a really, really challenging management problem. How do we feed information? And then there's this feed, this collection, where our partners, EMU, who were lecturing to you yesterday, are the network, the set of nodes, the real-time, the historic, the blending of data sets. All of these issues represent another strand within the story that comes together to make informed environmental management, which is the mantra that we are all preaching. Out of that, we have a classic project structure. And I started in this world back in about 1980, when I was chair of IBM's World Users GIS group, which very few of you, looking at the colour of your hair, will remember, but it was actually sited here in Amsterdam. So I used to come very regularly to Amsterdam to look at the world user community from IBM's perspective. And this is how we did it. We started with user requirements, system specs, systems development, user test, system implementation. That was project management. And the red bits are users. You would ask them at the beginning whether they agreed with you what you were going to do, because you'd already decided what you were going to do, and you would ask them just before the end whether they agreed that you had done it, and then you implemented the system. And this is developer-driven project management. It has fixed outcomes, it's very easy to change manage, it's very easy to cost, it's relatively easy to carry through. And it worked. We've got huge software packages running even now with legacy, developed on this kind of approach. But it's big system rather than consumer. And we're moving towards consumer software development, tool development, model development. In the 80s, the IT department was the gatekeeper of everything. Nowadays, the end user is getting closer and closer to the heart of development. These projects were imposed on the users. I worked with commercial groups who sold software, and they were selling software, GIS packages in 1980 for £15,000, which is what, €20,000, stuff that we would expect to get on open source free today. So these systems worked, but this is not the way to go. We've got to bring the user tighter into the system. And let me start by saying we, Geodata, haven't invented this message. It is part of a trend, a global trend. My good friend here alerted me in a meeting in Portsmouth about a month ago to the fact that TNO has a division which is doing just this, a co-design division. I looked it up on the website, I learned, look at that, you've only got to ask the users if you're going to listen to them. So I listened and I adjusted the way that I look at things. So we have a trend as we bring users more closely in, but how we do that is interesting. And the approach that we are beginning to move towards in Geodata is one of not imposed solutions, but accepting that the development community, and I'd stress it's software development or tool development or model development, it works equally well with all of them, we need to alert the user community to what the broad capability of the system we're thinking of might encompass, because we have to inform them to make a decision. We then do a user audit, but we also undertake a process that we call user engagement. We have to actually produce a relationship, a working relationship of mutual respect with our users in order for them to feel that they are informed and they're engaged in the process. And it then moves back into the development world and we produce an initial system spec. The second difference these days is that the users are much more tightly involved in the development process. So rather than developing the whole suite of the software tool or model, we tend to take it phase by phase and check whether we're going in the right direction. That has all kinds of advantages I'll come back to, but above all, in long projects, and EU research projects are often 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, the user requirement changes during the project. So if you want to be able to deliver something that is still useful, you actually have to migrate the targets. That isn't because the users are fools, it is because their world is evolving as rapidly as our world is evolving. So we do need to have an evolutionary development process. Mission critical, in our view, is that alongside that software development process, we have a management development process. What we have to do is develop a business case, we have to identify a management context, and we have to get management buy-in. And if you don't do this, you have failed. It is as simple as that. Many EU projects I have worked on that have been condemned to failure from the very beginning because they had no chance whatever of implementing anything at the end, because they didn't start to talk to the managers until the project was finished. The team then dismantles and moves out to do something different, and nobody is left behind to carry through into rollout, dissemination, implementation. So this coincident development of the system, research on that, and development of the management context is absolutely critical. Once you've got that, you can refine the system and launch the application, and then you move into the management of change. And if you are into application, you're into the implementation of the system, then change management becomes continuous. Now, we see this not simply as co-design, but co-design, co-development, and co-management. And we're looking now at integrated communities which partner the development of usable systems which actually get used at the end. And we are moving, believe me, we are moving into a world in which EU funding in particular is increasingly expecting use, not merely usable. User means it could be sometime, somewhere, perhaps used. The EU want to see it used on the ground. And if we're going to do that, we need this kind of partnership for sure. Where does the user fit? Obviously back there at the beginning. The user has been back there at the beginning since the 1970s and 1980s. Very much here. This is a user community sitting here within the co-development team, totally dominant in what we call user readiness, that we have to have a usable system and a user-ready community and put the two together. And then, of course, later on, the user takes over. The user is completely dominant and the developer becomes a servant. Nearly finished. Business case. Well, there are actually two business cases, one from the user perspective and one from the developer perspective. This kind of co-design, co-management approach produces a much better match between user need and delivered solution. Something we haven't really got time to look at, but it produces an awareness of statutory and legal constraints, which with environmental management applications is absolutely critical, because we're working within an extremely complex legal and governance context, where unless we are able to demonstrate that the model, the tool, the software that we are using meets statutory requirements, it isn't usable. From the user's perspective, they get much more control on risk. They are ready to apply the system as soon as it's developed, and the whole development life cycle is shortened. Now, all you've got to do is turn that around, and you can see that the business case from the developer perspective is very simple. As I've stressed, because the user's requirements change during the project, and back in the 1980s, when I used to come to Amsterdam to talk about GIS, we always regarded that as villainy. That was a crime. How dare the user one year say they want this and the next year say they want that? We're developers. We're going to produce a system that we want to produce. User requirements evolve. We have to evolve alongside them. But at the same time, we've got to be able to control costs. And that is much more complex, but actually more satisfactory under these co-design arrangements, because you don't go very far along directions that are non-profitable before the users tell you that you're going wrong. So you don't waste a lot of time and money. It does ultimately become a more controllable system. We believe, I certainly believe with a passion, that new techniques, new technologies, new attitudes, new approaches only ever get applied anywhere in the world. Netherlands, UK, the Congo, China, they only get applied if somebody's career is enhanced by their existence. They don't get applied because they are good science. They don't even get applied because they make a profit, because they don't make a profit for the individual manager. So we have to find champions who have an incentive to take our ideas and implement them. And those champions, I don't know if you use this word, but way back from the 1970s, this word was used, that when you're dealing with technological innovation, you need a champion within the user community. And those champions are much more effective if they are high-level end users. And by using your co-management, you can achieve that. So there we go. We had got a system in which I believe that we better reflect user needs. We've got all kinds of problems, and Craig started talking to them, to you about them yesterday. Problems in terms of developing demonstrator products, pilot products that truly reflect the capability of the science and the thinking, but also the complex requirements of the users. We have to manage end user expectations. The end user is now used to Google, they are used to ITC being free, they expect everything to be instantaneous, complex, sophisticated, proactive. And for us, the development community, that is a huge demand as we move into new technologies. And We need to find ways of selecting tiny elements of the real world, tiny elements of our software world, of their complex flood management world. I bet there were some floods around Europe yesterday. These techniques, these attitudes were there. This is our challenge. Starting up slowly, but nevertheless, in our view, this is the start, it's the middle, and it's the end. And if we don't get this user relationship right, it doesn't matter what the technology is or what the software is, we don't get the success that we deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for a perfect introduction to the team. I suppose there are questions, remarks. Starting up slowly. Okay, Rulo.
Good morning. Very nice presentation. So this is basically, you know, and I'm sort of more on the development side, but this really reflects sort of agile, you know, development. You know, I guess that's a term used in the United States there, but sort of applied not only to the project part, but to the whole, to the developing part, but to the whole project part. Would you say that's about correct, or?
I think that's very much a summary. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions or remarks?
I think the key is that we're taking it beyond the software development into the wider project and beyond the project into the subsequent management.
Marian.
Thank you very much for nice talk. You know, the problem that there are some such a talks needed means that what is written in handbooks on software engineering is not assimilated by many of us. So this is because you know, all of these steps are recognized and pretty well known for a long time, but we are not implementing them. So such a talk is really needed from time to time. And maybe with all these ideas of agile extreme programming, we are in a better position because they require to involve users from the very, very beginning in the software development process. So the idea in which we develop the system up to end and then show to the user, it is something which is very wrong in the context of such development. We should have a very simple prototype of what we are going to build and show them as soon as possible and involve them in the process of improvement. So it is much better it will be clear that from the very beginning we will have requirements which will be very general, then it will become better and better. Maybe one approach would be even to produce a kind of a user's guide at the very beginning, and to even the system will not be working for it.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Yes. Rob.
I was wondering how you are looking to the open source community. There's a lot of development going on. Perhaps people want to keep their secrets. But I think open source helps to improve products much faster. So how is that that field?
You have to be agile here. Fascinating question. Geodata, dare I say this, Craig, Geodata is obsessed with open source. It believes in it like a religion. And I don't really. I believe in both. I think there is a position for the established church and there is a position for the alternative religions around the edge. I haven't really experienced the notion that open source software development is more closely linked to the user than commercial software development. I would almost say the opposite, that the open source community is an impassioned community of specialists who are using the pressure and the encouragement of people like them to develop software communally. Whereas in the commercial sector, there is at least the beginning of the recognition that at the end of the day, you have to sell it. and you have to maintain it. And to do that, you've got to engage with users. So although it's heresy, and I have many times debated this with my geodata colleagues, because I've said they are all totally obsessed with open source. I think there is a place for big commercial development as well as open source development, because I don't think the user figures very strongly in either, but they get a better chance with the big groups than the small.
Is that commercial development?
The profit.
Okay. One last comment.
Yes, because you have used the word maintenance, and it is clear that maintenance consumes something like 80% of resources. So, and we, in all of these European projects, we are working for this 20%. Nobody is taking care about what will be with this 80% and how to organize this. So probably we need to put a kind of pressure on some means which enable to continue this maintenance processes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a small present for you.
Oh, that's very kind.
Okay.